What's good, everyone, and welcome back to another reaction video. Today we are reacting to uh embarrassing dumb ways people were cut from the gene pool. I'm trying not to get banned here by saying the word, but you get the point. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you do, hit the like button below, hit the subscribe button to support the channel, support the content provided, and so on and so forth. Hit the notification button to be notified immediately when the new video comes out. And if there's any videos you'd like to recommend that I should react to, put it down in the comment section below, and I'll react to it as soon as possible. Now, with all this said, let's get right on into this video, shall we? Okay. Oh, and the links it, and be sure to get BMA's love. This is for the video that they made. Now let's get started.
From the guy who got so drunk that he flew a helicopter and crashed it into a hotel, to the woman who went live on Facebook whilst driving and live streamed her own death. Stay tuned for more Darwin Award winners. I don't know much, but if there's one thing I do know, it's that drunkenness rarely results in good ideas. Let's just say we don't talk about what happened between me and Cheryl from accounting at the 2023 Christmas party. Anywho, drunken tales don't come much worse than this first story. It was 2024, and a 23-year-old New Zealander had just landed a promotion while working at an Australian helicopter company. As you can imagine, the good news called for a celebratory drink. However, one drink led to another, and the guy wound up so drunk that he had to be put to bed by his colleagues. Now, it's at this point that most of us would simply pass out. Though, alas, this guy considered it to be the perfect time to fly a helicopter. And no, I'm not kidding. What is important to note is that the guy did have a pilot's license back in New Zealand, but just wasn't permitted to fly in Australia. So it's not as if he was a complete amateur. That being said, taking liftoff is hardly a great idea on a stomach full of beer. Nevertheless, the drunken pilot somehow managed to gain access to one of the helicopters at his work and took to the sky. He reportedly hovered over a no-fly zone in the central business district of Queensland before taking a crash landing into a Hilton hotel. As you can probably imagine, he died. On the bright side, he somehow managed to avert seriously injuring or killing anyone else, which, given that he was recklessly wielding an aircraft, is a miracle. It's tragic and yet could have been avoided entirely had he not been so terminally stupid. You smell that? Yep, smells like a Darwin Award winner to me. As you can tell by looking at me, I'm not exactly a regular at the gym. And after hearing this next morbid tale, well, I'm hardly in a rush to join one either. Our story takes place in China back in 2023, where a 27-year-old personal trainer was pumping some iron at the gym. Completely alone in the gym and with no one to spot him, the guy ambitiously attempted to bench press a mighty 220 pounds. Only it soon became clear that his eyes were bigger than his muscles as he struggled to lift the weight. Things quite literally got out of hand when the barbell slammed down and crushed the guy's neck, stopping airflow and causing him to suffocate. And as if the situation wasn't horrifying enough, he was filming his set, meaning he literally captured his own death in graphic detail. Obviously, I'm not going to do a Logan Paul and show a dead guy on YouTube, but viewers of the video described how after the weight dropped, his body violently convulsed before deflating into a deathly limp state. It's a harrowing tale and yet a stark reminder to always be safe and sensible when lifting weights. You should always lift what your muscles can handle, not what your ego wishes they could handle. Which is exactly why the only thing I lift are these Darwin Awards when I'm handing them out to fools like him. Though I must admit, the real prize is my Darwin Awards themed poster called Natural Selection in Action, showcasing.
So, one was intoxicated while trying to fly a plane, and the other, yeah, no, that's okay. Wow, we actually
Right
went
now on my merch
somewhere
store
there.
linked in the description, so go grab it now while stock lasts. But from a fitness fiend to a junk food junkie, this next
Huh?
story is less about going out with a bang and more about going out with a mukbang. For those who don't know, mukbanging is a social media trend where people consume gross amounts of junk food all in the name of entertainment. And it turns out that gouging calorific quantities like this on a regular basis can
What
cause
the
health complications.
frick?
Who'd have thought? With a TikTok following only just larger than his pant size, a 24-year-old Turkish man would stream his daily junk food binges to his audience of over 183,000 followers. As he feasted on thousands of calories per day, he became so morbidly obese that he could no longer care for himself and even struggled to breathe, among many other health issues. As a matter of fact, the Calorie King spent the latter 3 months of his life in the hospital due to unspecified weight-related issues. And well, by March 2025, it was the last orders for the mukbanger as he passed away in the hospital. His official cause of death remains a mystery to the public, but it's not hard to imagine how the years of extreme gluttony likely took their toll and caused his system to shut down. And while it was his
Yeah.
choice to not seek help, we have to question his loved ones who
Yeah, I'm gonna admit, I don't understand the appeal to these kind of food things. You know, if it was just a thing where you go to a restaurant, have a meal with friends while answering questions, then yeah, where uh said friends actually ask the questions, I can get that. But this, no, I don't understand it. Even then, I only understand a sizable portion.
enabled this. But hey, it was totally worth it for the views, right?
No,
Ah,
no, it
2007.
wasn't.
People still used iPods. Ellen was actually liked. I still had my hair, and more importantly, the Nintendo Wii was hot off the press and all the rage. Millennials were
True.
entranced by its motion sensor magic that allowed us to play tennis in our living rooms and would do anything to get our hands on one. Apparently, even die for one. It all began with a
What?
U.S. radio station, KDND-FM, hosting a competition with a prize Nintendo Wii at stake. The competition was aptly named Wii for a Wii, with the premise being that the 18 participants would have to drink 250 milliliter bottle of water in 2 minutes. They would then have to drink one more bottle every 10 minutes. Whoever lasted the longest and resisted the urge to go pee would take home the Wii. Keen to get her
That
hands
doesn't
on one
sound
for her 3
healthy.
children, a 28-year-old mom who took part was thought to have guzzled somewhere between 5 and 9 liters of water.
What
Despite this,
the
she
hell?
unfortunately didn't win the Wii, but that was soon to be the least of her worries. You see, it seems no one organizing or participating in this competition considered the possibility of water intoxication. While there is no set amount of water that causes water intoxication, it's easier to think about in terms of how much water a person's kidneys can process per hour. For a healthy adult, this is around 1 liter per hour. Drink excessively more than this, and it'll dilute the sodium in your bloodstream and cause cells to swell. This is why professionals typically recommend an adult to drink around 2 liters per day for healthy levels of hydration. So you can imagine that having drank potentially 9 liters of water in such a short time, this woman was at dangerous levels of intoxication. After the competition, she suddenly fell ill and called in sick for her shift later that day. And well, within 5 hours, she was found dead. It's a tragic story, but one that would have been entirely preventable had someone along the line had the foresight to see just how dangerous this was. You may not have won the Wii, but you know what you did win? Yep, that's right. You won a Darwin Award. Yay! In a world of Kardashians, it's never been more fashionable to have a big booty. And hey, as a man with 2 working
Excuse
eyes,
me?
who am I to complain if women want to have bigger butts? However, as my grandma always said, always make sure your butt implant doctor has a medical license, darling. She was a very strange lady. Now, the 31-year-old New York woman of whom
Huh.
our story revolves around had actually already had a successful butt implant procedure, but grew tired of all the junk in her trunk and sought to have the implants removed. The only trouble was she was on a bit of a budget, so instead of visiting a legitimate clinic, she made the not-so-wise decision to visit an unlicensed surgeon's home in New York.
Okay, that is just a big mistake in general. Such a thing is really dumb. Like, really, really dumb. There's a reason why people need medical licenses because they are approved to actually perform high risk surgeries and have the skills that one needs.
Hi, everybody! Just let that sink in for a moment. The woman willingly let an unlicensed surgeon perform surgery on her in his home. Like many a Darwin Award winner before her, the woman didn't have the foresight to see how this could be a potentially deadly endeavor and thus put her life in the rookie surgeon's hands. As the procedure began, the wannabe surgeon administered the woman with lidocaine, which is a common local anesthetic used to numb the area. Things were going swimmingly until it became apparent that he'd overdosed the woman, causing her to go into cardiac arrest. Immediately rushed to the real hospital, medics found the woman in a state of no brain activity, and she was later pronounced dead as a result of suspected lidocaine toxicity. While the creepy unlicensed doctor was arrested and charged for his crimes, I can't help but think none of this would have happened had someone had the street smarts to not get open butt surgery from a novice surgeon at his sketchy home. I'm starting to think people want my precious Darwin Awards. Across the pond in the UK, our British cousins have this bizarre thing known as free healthcare. However, for the most part, getting these appointments can be tough. So when a British man couldn't get a dentist appointment, he took matters into his own hands. It was 2024 and the 52-year-old had been plagued by the agonizing pain of a wisdom tooth and could no longer bear the pain. So much so that when he couldn't get an NHS dental appointment, he grabbed a pair of rusty old pliers and had at it himself.
Are 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 you mental? Wisdom teeth. Okay, one, you do not remove your own wisdom teeth. Never do that. Wisdom teeth are one of the more complicated set of your teeth. They are literally, if you don't take the proper procedures and all that, you can actually have very, very big issues. And they're not pleasant.
He's an idiot.
I hope he says them.
Needless to
explain, I can't remember all of them.
This was a terrible idea. With such little regard for hygiene, the resulting wound became infected and caused him to contract sepsis, aka blood poisoning. And with that, he was on a one-way trip to the graveyard. It's one thing to DIY your backyard patio, but to DIY your own dentistry? Yeah, I'd say it's always best to leave that to the professionals. If you can cast your mind back to 2016, you might remember Facebook launching Facebook Live, a way of live streaming to Facebook, which is all fun and games until some doofus unintentionally live streams their own demise. The year was 2017, and as all perfectly safe stories begin, two young women from the Czech Republic were speeding dangerously down the highway at over 74 miles per hour. Clearly too cool for school, the girls thought what better time to go live on Facebook and show off their road shenanigans. Talking to the camera, giggling, and completely distracted from the road, it probably comes as no surprise that the girls soon lost control of the car and plowed into a road barrier. And the worst part, it was all posted live to Facebook. With the car totaled and the girls unconscious, the phone somehow survived the impact and continued to stream the aftermath of their stupidity. Shockingly, the driver, while in a critical condition, actually managed to survive. The same, however, couldn't be said for the passenger who literally live-streamed her own departure from Earth. I mean, if that doesn't get the likes, I don't know what will. On the bright side, their idiocy didn't miraculously inflict injury on anyone else, so I feel no guilt in saying they got exactly what they had coming to them. Have you ever thought it'd be a good idea to dance on top of a moving truck?
No.
Yeah, me neither. And yet here we are with a story about some numbskull who chose to do exactly that. Our story takes place in 2022 in Texas, where a 25-year-old grown man snuck his way onto the top of an 18-wheeler unbeknownst to the driver. It was there that he decided to film himself dancing, all the while the truck was moving. It's unclear whether this was just a display of absolute insanity, desperation for TikTok views, or all of the above. His one-man party, however, was soon crashed when the truck passed under a bridge and knocked the man from his stage. As you can probably imagine, the impact of the bridge and fall, heightened by the speed of the truck, did quite the number on the guy, and he was later pronounced dead at the hospital. I guess it's fair to say he at least
That kind
died
of
doing
figured.
what he loved. Back in 2013, Oxford Dictionaries named selfie as its word of the year. And it's pretty accurate considering that since the early 2010s, the world has been selfie mad. So much so, it seems some selfie addicts will stop at nothing to get the perfect snap. It was 2025 and a 53-year-old Russian woman was traveling in Sri Lanka. Aboard a train passing through the countryside, the woman was so enchanted by the views of Sri Lanka that she decided to take a quick selfie. And what better place to get the perfect snap than hanging your entire body from the train's footboard?
What
I
the
can't see
hell?
any way this would end terribly. But as the woman occupied herself with getting just the right angle, she somehow missed the giant rock ahead that would send her flying from the train and into an early grave. Her dying words were, "Make sure you post my selfie to Facebook." I know Disney movies might make animals seem all cute and funny, but it's important to remember.
Oh, god damn. Seriously. Medical to car to people just trying to. It's always for. It's always for social media. Why is it more times than not social media? Why is that the case? That
That wild animals are, nevertheless, wild. And as such, I can tell you that befriending one of them probably isn't such a great idea. In 2005, a South African farmer discovered a 5-month-old baby hippo washed up in a river. But rather than handing it over to the professionals or releasing it into the wild, he decided to adopt the wild animal and raise it as a pet. Even went as far as to christen the hippo with the name Humphrey. Over the years, the two formed a close bond, with the farmer even claiming that he saw Humphrey like a son. They would play with each other, and the farmer would even ride on the hippo's back. But despite claiming his hippo pal was a lovable, gentle giant, others weren't quite convinced, including the farmer's wife, who spoke of how Humphrey had chased an old man and his grandchild up a tree where they were stuck for 2 hours. In fact, it was reported that Humphrey would regularly break out of his enclosure and aggressively chase down golfers at the nearby golf club. And well, considering that hippos are known to be one of the most dangerous animals in the world,
and they truly deserve that
fatally
one.
savaging around 500 people per year, it's hardly surprising that Humphrey had aggressive tendencies. Despite the very clear warning signs, the farmer maintained that Humphrey was safe and kept him around. That was until one fatal day in 2011. The so-called gentle giant finally turned on his master and savaged him in the very same river of which he'd been found 6 years prior. It's almost Shakespearean. I would bow out with some advice about not befriending wild hippos, but I don't think anyone else is actually stupid enough to do such a thing. As if public transport couldn't be any more torturous. You've somehow been unfortunate enough to sit next to someone tucking into some stinky grub. But if that sounds like your idea of hell, you won't believe this next story. You see, according to reports, it can be fairly common over in Pakistan for train commuters with a low income to bring their own small gas stoves onto the train and cook their meals there. Yep, people not only eating, but bringing open flames onto a train. What could possibly go wrong? Despite this being against the rules for obvious health and safety reasons, in 2019, 2 of these stoves exploded on a train and set it into flames. Immediately engulfed by fire, innocent passengers' lives were tragically claimed. A staggering 71 to be precise, along with an additional 43 who were injured, 11 of whom were in critical conditions. I can only hope that the 2 jackasses with stoves were included in that mortality so that I can give them their well-deserved Darwin Awards. So next time you're on a public transport and you've sat next to someone gouging on a meatball marinara, you might just consider yourself lucky. How much would you commit to a dare? Would you risk your life for a dare?
No.
If you answered no, then congratulations, you're probably not an absolute idiot. If you answered yes, well, you could be on your way to a Darwin Award, just like this next fella. You see, during the holiday period, there's no better excuse to have a few drinks and get merry. However, over in Australia back in 2019, one man took it too far. The 35-year-old father of three was known to be the life of the party and would never turn down a dare. So much so that when a boozy dare called for him to eat a live gecko, the good sport grabbed a gecko and tossed it down his gullet. I'm still not sure on whether this was former pet Gary the gecko or just one found outside. After all, this is Australia. But in either case, I think most of us can see why this probably wasn't such a wise idea. And while despite
It really
fulfilling the dare,
isn't.
the glory was short-lived. Only 2 days after his gecko snack, the guy was rushed to hospital after complaining of agonizing stomach cramps. Medics initially dismissed his symptoms as merely gastrointestinal issues, but after a day in the hospital, they diagnosed him with salmonella. But whereas salmonella typically takes a few days to a week to recover from, this gecko gobbler began to rapidly decline, from vomiting green bile to even having black urine. Worse yet, his lungs began to fill with some sort of fluid, and his belly was so swollen that he looked heavily pregnant. And as if his suffering couldn't get any more gruesome, even his testicles reportedly swelled to the size of grapefruits and began leaking fluid. But he wasn't feeling the Christmas cheer so much anymore, right? But after 10 grueling days of essentially rotting from the inside out, the battle was finally over. Although doctors confirmed that it was entirely possible that the gecko was to blame for his death, there was a little bit of discourse about whether or not he actually ate the gecko, as friends and family couldn't remember if they actually saw him eat it or not. I mean, they could have just asked him whilst he was alive. Just an idea. I, however, am going to assume he did eat the gecko because I already got his name engraved on the Darwin Award, and that stuff ain't cheap. Despite being packed with sugar, sweeteners, and all other types of processed ingredients, we're all
Where are
guilty
we
of
going
indulging
with
in a bit
this?
too much candy from time to time. However, for those with a particular taste for licorice, limited consumption might not only be cavity-saving, but life-saving too. For one 54-year-old construction worker from Massachusetts, he couldn't get enough of the candy, particularly licorice. As a matter of fact, it's what made up essentially his entire diet. The licorice lover would gobble the stuff day in, day out, rarely making time for proper food and meals. Now, there's a ton of obvious reasons as to why this is a terrible way to live, but licorice specifically contains glyceric acid, which, while safe in small amounts, can actually be lethal when consumed excessively. Causing high blood pressure and low potassium levels, it can be especially dangerous for those with pre-existing heart or kidney conditions. Nevertheless, the guy continued with his licorice love affair that was until one fatal day. While shockingly eating an actual meal in a fast food restaurant, he suddenly passed out and was rushed to the hospital. It was there the following day that his candy cruise came to an end. But remember, folks, no matter how you choose to live your life, you will die sooner or later, in which case you might as well just give up, because nothing has any meaning. I'm sorry. I don't know what got into me there. Let's move on. On to something a little more lighthearted now, and we all love a good joke. If you think about some of the funniest jokes you've ever heard, you probably laughed a lot, maybe even cried. Perhaps you lost your breath and your stomach began to hurt. However, if you're watching this video, I'm going to assume you didn't die. Hysterically, this is said to be the cause of death for one Greek Stoic philosopher, Chrysippus. The killer joke, in all senses of the word? Well, after he observed that a donkey had eaten all of his figs, Chrysippus said something to the effect of, "Give it some wine to drink." I guess you had to be there. Clearly tickled by the idea of a fig-full donkey sipping on some wine, Chrysippus's own joke sent him into a violent fit of laughter, so much so, he dropped dead. It almost sounds too crazy to be true, and that's because it might well be, considering the tale has been translated and interpreted across 2 millennia. In either case, I'll be sure to save that joke for my next date. At some point or another, most of us have probably taken it too far when it comes to drinking, which can often result in some embarrassing situations. Cheryl, if you're watching this, I didn't mean to call you 47 times last Thursday. In any case, you can at least be grateful that you're probably not as stupid as this next guy. This story takes place in China back in 2023, where a work team were out having a team-building dinner event. Loosened up by a few woo-woos, the boss proposed a drinking challenge. Whoever could outdrink him would win 20,000 yuan, about $2,700. If they lost, they would have to pay $1,300 to treat the entire company. The stakes were high, but one of the workers accepted the challenge. a decision that would soon prove to be regretful. The money-hungry fool got to guzzling a Chinese liquor known as Baijiu, which can have an alcohol content of up to 60%.
Oh, God.
Despite this, the guy proceeded to chug through an entire liter of the stuff in just 10 minutes. For context, this would have been give or take about 26 units of alcohol. The weekly recommendation is 14 units, and drinking more than 12 units over a short period of time is enough to cause alcohol poisoning. As you can imagine, his excessive drinking was far from a glorious victory, considering that he eventually collapsed from the intoxication. Rushed to hospital, he was diagnosed with severe alcohol poisoning, aspiration, pneumonia, suffocation, and cardiac arrest, all of which resulted in his death. I mean, at least the 20,000 yuan he won could be put towards his funeral costs. Totally worth it, right? If you're anything like me, you're probably very content tucked up in your jammies with a tub of Haagen-Dazs and a few episodes of Sex and the City. And, well, it's stories like this next one that give me all the more reason to stay safe inside. Alaska, 2023, and a group of adventure-seeking pals were trekking along the Turnagain Mudflats. Now, for anyone who doesn't already know, mudflats are expansive areas of soft, muddy ground in what are known as intertidal zones, aka parts of the shore that are sometimes exposed when the tide is low. As a result, the silty mud becomes very moist and unstable and can even behave like quicksand. Worse yet, the Turnagain mudflats in Alaska are specifically known to be extremely dangerous, with experts warning people to not venture onto them under any circumstance. Safety schmafety, thought this group of schmucks as they strolled onto the mudflats, blissfully unaware that they'd be leaving with one friend less. Hubris soon caught up with them as one of the merry men, a 20-year-old chap, got stuck in the mud. Slowly but surely being devoured into the earth, the group of friends tried to pull the man out to no avail. The emergency services were alerted, but it took them around 50 minutes to arrive, what with the group being in an isolated region. By which point, it was too late. The man had succumbed to the mudflats. It's a chilling story, but alas, entirely avoidable, had he and his pals had the smarts to not be there in the first place. Yeah, I think I'll stick to Sex and the City. Ooh, in this episode, Carrie has a fling with a younger man. OMG, that is so Carrie. How far would you go to prove a point? To claim the glory of being right?
Why does... Okay, this is... Okay, admittedly, not the strangest, but
yourself?
still...
Probably not, and that's precisely why you're not in a Darwin Awards video. Adamant that the vest he was wearing was stab-proof, a 22-year-old British lad was so determined to prove his naysaying friend wrong that the numbskull grabbed a kitchen knife, turned it on himself, and plunged it into his own chest. And well, it turned out the vest wasn't all that stab-proof after all. Severely impaled, the man was rushed to the hospital, but alas, there was nothing medics could do to save him. I guess that's the price of pride, or in...
Oh my... That actually has to be the dumbest one. Like, of all things. That is really, really dumb. Why the frick would they... Oh my god. Why, of all things?
In this case, absolute and undoubted stupidity. Ah, bees, nature's hard little workers. But while for the most part they might be content bumbling around, pollinating and making honey, they pack a mean sting that they're not afraid to use should they feel threatened. Back in 2024, a 75-year-old man from Texas was tired of some trees that were on his land, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. That was, he got behind the wheel of a bulldozer and rammed into the trees. Only trouble was, these trees weren't just home to bees, but Africanized bees, aka killer bees. Known to reside in southern states such as Texas, these angry bees will attack anything or anyone who perceivably threatens their nest. So you can bet that when a bulldozing maniac goes full throttle at their nest, they're gonna react. The enraged swarm of killer bees avalanched the man, stinging him more than 60 times on his face and neck alone. It's unreported exactly how many stings he suffered, but some sources claim it would take more than 1,000 to cause death. And though luckily there was someone there who called 911, it was simply too late and the tree trashing oak was pronounced dead at the scene. I mean, if we consider that the bees likely also died after stinging him, it's kinda even Stevens, right? With epic battles, war enemies, and scary mythical creatures, there are plenty of ways to die when gaming. But what about when gaming is the very thing that causes you to die in real life? Secluded in a dark and dingy room, a young Thai man would spend all hours of the day, every day, gaming at his computer. Rarely stopping to eat and barely stopping to sleep, his parents desperately pleaded with him to change his ways, but there was no getting through to him. However, one evening back in 2019, the gaming addict planned to do an all-night gaming marathon. And while this was hardly anything new to him, amidst the intensity, he suddenly collapsed dead. Tragically, the gamer was found by his father, but it was too late. After examining his body, medics concluded that he'd suffered a stroke, which they believed was a direct result of excessively gaming. As a matter of fact, it's believed that adults under the age of 60 that have increased screen time and lead sedentary lives are more likely to experience strokes. So if you've learned anything from this chilling tale, it's that you should shut that computer and go touch some grass every once in a while. But, watch the rest of this video at least, please. Daddy needs those views. Lovers are bound to quarrel. It's a natural part of any relationship. But for one British couple living in Australia, conflicts were a daily occurrence, at least according to their neighbors. However, one evening, the toxic couple's argument was especially volatile, concluding with the woman running out of the room, or so she attempted. You see, she dashed right into some patio doors, which she evidently thought were open, and smashed the glass. Shockingly, the glass severed a vital artery in the woman's arm, causing her to lose a lot of blood. So much so that there was nothing medics could do to save her, and within a day she was pronounced dead. Moral of the story is always watch where you're going, folks, or better yet, don't date people who make you want to run through glass doors. Now, if you were anything like me during high school, you probably would rather have died than go to gym class. However, for one high school senior, gym class became his place of death after a regrettable mistake. The year was 2013, and a group of high school pals in Georgia were shooting some hoops at the school's gym. As they often would, they placed their sneakers out of the way inside the big rolled-up gym mats. The game was over and the boys cleared off home. That was, all but one, who was left behind completely alone. As he dove headfirst into one of the gym mats to retrieve his sneakers, his body became unexpectedly lodged. It wasn't long before oxygen ran scarce and the guy began to suffocate. Alone and trapped, the guy unfortunately died as a result of his dumb misadventure. If you think about it, he kind of slam dunked himself. Too soon? And on that note, that's all for this episode of Darwin Awards. Let me know down in the comments, do you know of anyone who...
Honestly, that the last few took me by surprise. I didn't expect to hear something like that. But it's apparently a thing. Despite how crazy it sounds, it's a legitimate thing. Huh. Honestly, I'd say the dumbest thing was this whole thing involving the knife. Like, everything else could be taken in a certain perspective and all that. But the fact is, this guy just literally did that with the knife. And that is honestly more dumber than anything that was in this video. More dumber than anything in previous videos. Like the hippo thing, the hippos were like, hippos are some of the most dangerous animals, with their body being hard to pierce. And they are literally tough. Like, even things like lions and such don't mess with them. But, and to a degree, the guy pacified the hippo for a certain number amount of years. This guy, in all of his stupidity, literally used a knife and did that to take himself off the gene pool to prove a freaking point. There's nothing on this list that can tell me otherwise on who deserves the reward more than that idiot. This is infuriating, in all honesty. I'm gonna admit, after that bit, I zoned out a bit because I was trying to process the fact that someone literally did that. And, and it kept bugging me because that is the dumbest, most unreasonable thing someone could freaking do. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, hit the like button down below. Hit the subscribe button to support the channel, support the content provided, and so on and so forth. Hit the notification button, being notified immediately when your video comes out. Tell me what you think was, like, the most deserving of this reward, because you already know mine. Is this freaking knife thing? What the? just just enjoy. I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you all next time. Bye. That is freaking infuriating. I I freaking. I mean, I learned some new stuff at the very least, but the knife thing is just no. I'll see you all next time. Bye.